As tensions between the United States and the BRICS alliance deepen, President Donald Trump has ignited fresh global trade concerns by threatening a 10% additional tariff on countries aligning with BRICS and its policies that oppose American interests. The announcement made via social media handle came just days before a July 9 deadline set by the U.S. for finalizing trade deals with global partners. Now, analysts are warning that this hardline approach could reshape trade flows and global alliances, especially as the expanded bloc's pushes for reforms to the global economic order, as we've seen happen over time. So this evening, we're joined by Abraham Grant, who's a public affairs analyst, and of course, Professor Kalu Ojah, with Emeritus Professor of Financial Economics at the University of Pretoria's Gordon Institute of Business Science. And he joins me from Johannesburg, South Africa. Professor Ojah, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Thank you. Thank you for having me. And we're hoping to have Abraham Great and, of course, Dr. Nnaemeka Obiaraeri, who is an investment banking executive and development economist, also join us. But while we wait for them, Professor Ojah, now from day one, U.S. President Donald Trump has always been about make America great again. Now, is tariffs doing justice to that?
From evidential information we have, is clearly not doing that. If anything, it's hurting America. And if you know anything about economics, basic economics, international trade, fosters economic well-being, welfare across countries that engage in trade. That if you impose tariff and you are the only one that the country can trade with, who pays for the tariff? The imposing country, the country that imposes tariff. Tariff is a tax on consumers, almost similar to a VAT tax. So politically, it isn't popular in the U.S., and none of it has been pushed through. Clearly, there's a lot of talk and rhetorics about it, but none has been implemented against, in fact, his most favored customers, countries, such as the North American free trade area countries such as Canada and Mexico, the largest trading partners of the U.S. There's been a lot of political wrangling, political scuttling, but economically it has not been effectuated because that would be a big economic mistake. And Americans are waking up to the reality that they are the ones that will be paying for the tariff as tax. During the electoral campaign, the Democratic candidate, Kamala Harris, kept making the point that this would be an additional tax for American households. And that is indeed the case. If you know anything about economics and how that works, that will be the case. And hence, one could say it has not been implemented because of the economic realities which have political consequences, not just for him, but for his party as well.
Well, but President Trump has always maintained that trade relations with the U.S. and other countries have been unfavorable, and that when you look at the tariff hikes as it relates to U.S. and other countries, there are a lot of imbalances, and that is what he's trying to correct. So are you saying that Trump is wrong on what he's trying to achieve?
As a student of economics, data does not lie. what has been pointed out as the formula or basis for which President Trump believes that the U.S. is being taken advantage of by its trading partners is simply by looking at trade deficit that the U.S. has vis-a-vis its trading partners. And it's obvious that the U.S. Has more trade deficit with its trading partners. But what is trade deficit, you must ask? Trade deficit simply means you're consuming more from your trading partners than your trading partner is consuming from you. And just for the sake of example, let's say those are the two countries trading with each other. There are two countries trading with each other. If you're consuming more than I'm consuming from you, it means you're borrowing money from somewhere beyond the income you earn from your export. Where is that money coming from? You're borrowing it from external sources. The same people you think are shortchanging you are lending money to you to consume more of their products than they consume of yours. So that's erroneous economics to then say, because you're running a trade deficit, that you're being shortchanged. That is the basic economics. You can't change that, and data will bear that out. So if you look at the U.S. capital account balance is in surplus. What that means, the world is lending more funds to the U.S. than the U.S. is lending to the world, and therefore they are using these borrowed funds to purchase more goods and services from other nations. So if anything, the U.S. and its citizens are benefiting from that position. And one of the ways to actually appreciate why Americans are at an advantage is that these funds, the borrowed funds are usually denominated in international money called dollars. And who prints dollars? The U.S. So they are getting it on the cheap in terms of the borrowed funds that they are using to consume more than the U.S. is producing.
So a lot of people...
So he's absolutely wrong from the standpoint of basic economics.
So that was what I was going to say. Like, a lot of people will probably be wondering what kind of data Donald Trump might be consuming right now that might be fueling his policy direction as the president of the largest free world. Now, Professor Ojah, many economists warn that the cost of hiked import taxes is often offset onto consumers, with the case as we are seeing right now. So won't Trump inadvertently be fueling inflation and hurting Americans more?
I beg your pardon? Would you repeat the question, please?
So I said, with the situation that many economists are equally saying that the cost of hiked import taxes, it will be transferred to consumers, basically because business owners will not want to run short. Now, this would mean that Trump might just be fueling inflation at the long run, and that would be hurting Americans more.
You're absolutely correct. And it's not just fueling inflation, but you could also be shedding employment. So some of these items that is placing tariff on, some of them are production inputs that are going to be used in the U.S. to produce other finished products that the Americans will consume, that the American company will export outside of the U.S. and therefore have foreign exchange earnings. So you have a double-edged sword as far as, not double-edged, sorry, double whammy. First of all, you increase inflation as a result of higher taxes that are placed on consumables. Secondly, some American companies that use imports, intermediate products that are imported for production purposes will find those to be a lot more expensive because they are the ones that are going to pay first before they turn around to charge the consumers after they would have produced the final goods with these intermediate products that they've imported. If they are unable to impose higher prices on consumers, or consumers are not forthcoming in buying this more expensive product, through their capital budgeting analysis, these American-based manufacturing companies will consider and determine that taking on additional production using these imported inputs will not be beneficial. In fact, they might compute a net present value that is less than zero, which means if you take on the additional import for production purposes, your return on that, the benefit you get in terms of cash will be far less than what you would have laid out to have this additional production. And no company in its right mind that exists would continue with such a project. They will defer the project until such a time that the conditions are more favorable. So in the interim, they're not going to keep on paying people who are not using non-existent additional intermediate products to produce new finished goods that nobody is going to buy. If they did, they will languish in their warehouse as inventories that are ready for sale, but nobody is interested in buying them. So whichever way you slice it, is negative for America.
Now, we can keep blaming President Trump, but it seems that it's part of his mantra from way back when it was the first time he was the president of the United States of America. And there was a time where he announced his new tax policy that the U.S. stock market suffered some sort of an immediate hit, as at the time he announced that. Now, before it eventually rebounded after suspending it for 90 days to open up, the position for negotiation, that's the negotiation window. But investors were also spooked, and a lot of people were asking questions, even up to now are still asking the question, is it a risk worth taking for the American economy? Because earlier on you said it's unpopular for that kind of trade policy to come on board, but it seems as though Trump is adamant on it.
Yes, he may be adamant about it. And there are utterances he had made in the past that were considered bluff. And there are those that people said he would never attempt putting through. And he's actually implemented those. But this is one that many economists and anybody who is a serious student of international trade believe that he will not push through. By the way, this has happened before. Smoot-Hawley in the 30s wanted to beggar Americans' neighbors by putting tariffs. I pushed it through, and it exacerbated the Great Depression. I mean, it's empirical evidence is there, data does not lie. And one argument he has made about wanting to punish the trading partners that he thinks are taking advantage of America is if you were to place this tariff, those companies who have taken production offshore are likely to come back to the U.S. and jobs will be brought back to the U.S. The offshoring will become back onshoring, and that will solve the problem. many are surprised that one who touts his credentials as a successful businessman that has become president does not understand that basic fact that you cannot move production factories and bases simply as though you're moving a chess piece on the chessboard. Yeah. It doesn't happen that way. Okay. Sometimes it takes you 3 to 5 years to really establish such a production outfit into the global production chain. And you can't just take up work once you feel like there is trade barriers put against this product, and so I'm going to move back. There is a reason why you went offshore in the first place. Yeah. What are the trade-offs? And if the trade-offs were supportive of American companies going overseas, the tariff may not be enough impetus to have you return back to the U.S. I don't think the people advising the president truly appreciate that aspect of what they think their policy advantage of this tariff policy would be.
All right, Professor Ojah, stay with me for a while. I'd like to bring Abraham Great into this conversation as a public affairs analyst. Abraham, thank you so much for joining us. Vice, please. Abraham, we can't hear you yet. On mute.
Okay, I am speaking. I believe I am unmuted.
Okay, yes, we can hear you now.
You hear me now?
Yes, Abraham, we can hear you now. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, since President Donald Trump came into power, he had announced that there will be sweeping tariffs or levies on imported goods into the United States. And he said that this will boost American manufacturing and protect jobs. Is it making the right move?
First of all, it is very hard for anyone to believe what the current president of America says, because even the president himself contradicts himself. And usually, from the pattern of his first administration, knowing him as a person, he speaks in a cacophonous way. He speaks to carry out his own agenda. And if you look at exactly what he's trying to achieve as it comes across, you realize that the dollarization is probably, like my co-panelist was saying earlier, the issue of dollarization seems to be his major qualms in this matter. When you look at why did America went to Libya, why did the presidency of Obama or Hillary Clinton as the foreign secretary at the time, why did they have to take Gaddafi on? Because there was focus from Africa to strengthen a form of currency that is supposedly meant to be able to reduce the power of the dollar. That means a lot to America. When you talk in terms of the global currency, you talk about dollar, you don't talk about currency itself, the flow. We measure electricity in megawatt, right? We measure weight in kilo. In the world that we live in today, we measure money actually by dollar. Dollar is the currency of the world. So when you have an amalgamation or a coming together of a sect like BRICS, is a major threat to American economy. And what President Trump would do, as he always does, is not a gentleman. He will come after those nations like a bulldog. Now, another thing is this. When you need to also look at the Trump's attitude, what I call the Trump's demeanor, his attitude towards life, towards business. If Trump wants something from you, he first of all, most of the time, threatens you. It threatens you so that, look at what he's doing with Nigeria. If you're not looking at dollarization, for example, you must accept, prisoners from Venezuela. He's talking about the issue of executive order to reduce the, the visa that Nigerians receive. You may look at that as a reciprocal, arrangement in immigration and stuff like that. But there are things it may not really want to curtail that visa. When it needs something in your nation, it will threaten you first, so that you can come on the table and then begin to negotiate. So when he gets what he wants, then he'd say, okay, that thing that I'm taking for you, I will give it back to you. He wasn't the person that gave you the thing in the first place. So what we are having here is Trump being Mr. Trump at his best. So you need very good foreign ministers from every nation that is going to be dealing with him. And I would say, I love what our president has done so far, and I hope he doesn't fall for the trap of countries like South Africa, like Liberia, and all the countries that feel the need to go and sit down in Washington with President Trump. He's going to mess you up. He's playing a game. And one of the best ways to play his game with him is not to fall into his trap. So stay on your lane, observe him, and come up with the best move like a chess game to know how to respond to whatever threat that Trump is coming up with. Well, again, dollarization is motive as it appears, and then Trump being Trump with his attitude towards business.
Well, we are going to talk about how these affected countries are going to respond to this. But then you mentioned BRICS, and I know that the president, that is Donald Trump, has said that if BRICS countries were to react by increasing their tariffs in response, now it would about double the new tariff percentage. I understand that the Brazilian president, Lula Inácio da Silva, has subtly called off his bluff. But then, is BRICS not in a precarious situation? Abraham, let me still get your response on this.
Again, who are the people that makes up the BRICS combination? You look at emerging market like Brazil. You look at solid market like India. I'm currently in China on a business trip, and I can tell you, China can easily call the bluff of America. You see what the response from China by imposing 125% tariff back on America in the first place. That is because, number one, China can consume everything that China is producing. China also experiences overcapacity. So they export because they have overcapacity, because there are incentive for manufacturers, for companies to produce. So sometimes they produce a lot more than is necessary. Now, China is beginning to find an alternative market. Brazil is an alternative market because of the population. Nigeria, with 240 million people, is an alternative market. So if Nigerians are wise right now, we move China goods in terms of manufacturing hubs into Nigeria, and then we can, because we have 36% that has been imposed on us, so we can actually export Chinese goods from Nigeria into America. But the strength of BRICS is getting stronger by the day. America will remain world power, but I tell you, a coming together like BRICS is going to give America a run for their money. And it depends on the policies and the leadership behind those nations.
Okay.
I believe they can take America on. America was not ruling the world before financially. America can still rule the world in terms of security and stuff like that. But financially, we already have disadvantage to the dollar, which is crypto. And I can tell you this, we think generationally. Between now and the next 25 years, you realize the money move is going to reduce. Right now, we spend a lot of money on card. We are going paperless. So the future of the world is crypto. So they can't hold on forever onto dollar. The world is going to, it's not only cryptic, it's going to be crypto. So blockchain is eventually going to superimpose itself over the dollarization mannerism.
All right, Professor Ojah, so Abraham is saying basically that the BRICS nation is going to be a major threat to the U.S. in the coming years. Now, could this mark the beginning of a deeper economic rift between emerging economies and the West?
I'm a bit hesitant to declare BRICS a threat. If anything, the U.S. is a threat to BRICS. The question, I may rephrase your question by saying, would BRICS be able to withstand this threat, if there were to be real threat, can BRICS overcome it? And I will argue that BRICS is in a position to call his bluff by the strength of the size of the BRICS countries, member states, and partners that now constitute 2/5 of the global economy. That is something to consider. That's number one. Number two, the population of this same BRICS-related group is about 50+% of the world population. And those two advantages, if harnessed properly, effectively, strategically, would have BRICS position itself in such a way that it will not be hurt. In fact, it will provide an opportunity for the BRICS bloc to strengthen the reasons for setting up the BRICS group in the first place. It is more or less a pushback on the Western dominance of the multilateral organizations that were supposed to be leading the multilateral world order. In reality, it has been a Western-led global order. And the BRICS, in my view, if they were to strengthen their economic muscle, then the likelihood is that they will really begin a real pushback. And the way they do that is precisely through what they are doing with trade. The trade, intra-BRICS trade, should increase. They must make an effort to increase that. And some of the initiatives they've set up in terms of the new development bank that is headquartered in China, with 2 branches in Brazil and the other one here in South Africa. The contingency reserve arrangement, which will not expose these developing and emerging market countries to the whims and caprices of the Bretton Woods institutions such as the IMF and the World Bank, particularly the IMF.
Okay.
When developing countries run into problems, those liquidity problems are resolved by holding these countries captive in such a way that they don't advance.
Okay, Professor Ojah.
Position themselves. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'd like you to just hold your thoughts and stay with us for a while. We need to go on a break now. I know it's going to be a big deal, or a great deal, for the BRICS nation to upend the Western dominance that has spanned over several decades. But then when we go on a break and return, we'll look at how that affects global trade dynamics. We'll be back in a bit. President Donald Trump has vowed to impose an extra 10% tariff on any country supporting BRICS policies that challenge U.S. interests, escalating an already volatile global trade landscape. The measure, due to take effect on August 1 if no deal is reached, follows strong criticism from BRICS finance ministers who labeled U.S. tariffs a threat to global economic stability. So what is going to be the position of the BRICS and other affected countries as regards the Trump trade tariff or policy that has tore through global dynamics as we speak. And I've been talking to Abraham Great, who's a public affairs analyst, and Professor Kalu Ojah, with Emeritus Professor of Finance Economics at the University of Pretoria's Gordon Institute of Business Science. Gentlemen, thank you so much for staying with us and, of course, sharing your expert knowledge on this particular matter. So I'll quickly come to Abraham. Now, we understand that BRICS is a country, or is a set of countries rather, that they are trying to organize the world trade in a way whereby it is beneficial to all. There's a bit of equality and there's a bit of freedom where everyone benefits. But then would it be tantamount to a major loss globally when you look at the dynamics if BRICS and other affected countries were to shift away from the West and pivot towards other probably beneficial markets?
You see, vision is a very powerful thing, and the vision that is driving an organization, a coming together, a body matters a lot. Now, when you look at who actually birthed BRICS and how did BRICS come about, you realize that BRICS, in my own opinion, seems to come about because of the global feud between America and Russia. Everyone knows that one of the biggest adversary of America is Russia, and vice versa. So it comes across to me that sometimes BRICS motive could be trying to get at America. Yes, other nations with pure motives are joining. And I'm always very careful of looking at Russia's intention, because Russia, remember, Russia was world power before America. America overtook Russia as world power. So if there is anything that has driven the leadership of Russia from the time that you see from the early 80s, it has been to snatch power back, or the global position of the world power. And one of the ways that they're going to do that is to rubbish America, to make Americans leaders, president. Look at what they did to the President Biden. You have to make American president look foolish, make UK prime minister look foolish. UK was changing prime ministers every now and then. France were having riots, everybody fighting the president in France. Germany was having issue. By the time you destabilize the Association of 1972, which is the European Union, you already achieved that in 2016 by removing United Kingdom from the bloc. If you weaken the powers that come together to remove you from the world position, there are high proclivities that you may return as world power. So for me, I see that. I may be wrong, but I see that as one of the motives behind the formation of BRICS. Yes, every other needy nation that needs to strengthen themselves sees this as an opportunity to join forces for economic reasons, to join up with Russia. But that might not be Russia's motive. But if the motive of Russia and everyone in the bloc is pure, here is one of the things that we'll go back to. One, let's go back to study history. At exactly the same time in 1938, we remember what happened? When we begin to have aggression of America again, what did it lead to? It leads to war. What has all of these policies and tariff and aggression leading to? We have a war in Ukraine. We have war now in, where else did we have a war? In Israel. You have a war in Iran. So you have almost 3 serious war going on in the world. That is telling you something. Pattern is repeating itself. How was the world able to conquer, the war of that time? To be able to defeat Hitler, we need to go back. If BRICS is going to be able to overpower or at least be at equal power with America, something significant is going to happen. And I don't see economics focusing on this. Why is the dollar so powerful? Number one, language. You see, almost every transaction in the world has to go through a Citibank, which is in New York, has to go through London or go through Hong Kong. What languages are spoken in these 3 regions? Number one, in New York, English. In London, English. And then again, in Hong Kong, the territory remain English language. For as long as English remain the major transactional Almost every software is written in English, almost accounting software. You have them in Russia, you have them in Chinese, you have them, but the volume of global transaction is translated in English language. If BRICS is going to be able to be at par, almost all of those nations involved in BRICS will have to give up their own language and make sure that all their transactions, all their documents, all their country is transacting, relating. Somebody may argue with me that they're already doing that, not at its fullness, because for you to establish dominance, language is one of the key ways to establish dominance. When economics are looking at this, they're looking at the economic variables, they're looking at the graphs, but you don't look at things that actually matter, the things that got us to where we are. The second thing is culture. What is the culture of people? People want to go to America to go and see. And America became what it is today first by make-believe. They created the movie industry by creating an impression of who they are for you to come and see. Every other nation, particularly I'll go back to Nigerians, Nigerians will stop, we have to stop demeaning Nigeria. Negative comments about Nigeria. I love what Nigerian is doing now with Nollywood. You know, almost everywhere in the world, people want to watch Nollywood. You are seeing a better picture. You've got to change the culture of how your country is perceived so that your people will see less dependency. Sometimes if people don't buy it from America, they don't believe it's genuine. Whereas somebody is making it in Aba or somebody is making it in Ibadan. So by the time every nation are self-consuming, like China, like I said, I'm currently in China, and I can say to you, before coming here, in the last maybe 6 weeks, I've been to New York. I mean, I live now in Ottawa. I've been to Seattle. I've been to Chicago in the last 6 weeks. And I can tell you all of those places, including London, none of them can match what China, in terms of development, that you see in Shenzhen, or you see in Guizhou, or you see in Guangzhou. Not to talk of Shanghai, it is far developed more than every other. Chinese don't give a damn going to America anymore.
Okay.
When the rest of the world see that there is no importance in relying on America, America will begin to tone down its voice.
Let's switch it up a bit. Let's switch it up a bit. Now, Professor Ojah, I know that the U.S. has a larger nominal GDP than any BRICS member states. But then we also understand that BRICS accounts for a quarter of global GDP and about half of the world's population. So now, with the narrative playing up now, is the BRICS really becoming a counterweight to the G7 group of advanced economies?
Again, the BRICS, I'll put it this way, in the context of the conversation we are having, which has to do with a tariff threat against BRICS members. No pun intended here. The trump card for the BRICS group is economics. You must grow your economic muscle for you to be able to fend off the tariff scare. And in the process of doing that, you literally find yourself growing up the ladder, the league table, as it were, of global economy in the world. So the G7 is simply the largest 7 economies in the world. Where is China there? Where is India likely to be in that ranking? Where is Brazil? So where is Indonesia? These are countries that belong to the BRICS group that are really making strides in climbing up that ladder. And so if they position themselves that way to get to a point where they begin to have a say, a very strong voice in the top 20 countries in the world, and then you advance to top 7. You cannot do that by any other means, not by politicking, but you come to the table with a strong bargaining position if your economy is strong. That's the starting point. My panel colleague was mentioning the role of culture. Yeah, culture is important. It could have an influence, but the real bargaining chip, the trump card, is economic strength. So if the BRICS were to effectively challenge or push back or defend itself against the tariff threat, or what I would call the tariff bluff, because nobody in a sane mind will carry through the threat of the American president about placing tariff on goods and services that are coming from all over the world. You'll be isolated, and the world will move on. And my suggestion is to challenge, whether it be G7, G20, or America's hegemony. You have to come to the bargaining, to the table with a strong bargaining position economically.
Okay.
And perestroika was the Russians starting transformation by political approach before economic approach. What did the Chinese do? They started with economics before political opening. Who won? Which ideology or strategy carried the day? It's the economics. And for us in Africa, as members of BRICS, what we must come to terms with as our trump card is to get our economic house in order, grow our economies, otherwise we will not be on the political table. That is secondary as far as I'm concerned.
All right, now, Abraham, it seems as though you and Professor Kalu Ojah are actually downplaying the possible strength of the West in terms of its dominance and what it can achieve. But then a few weeks ago, the US president threatened the EU with 50% tax unless it reached an agreement. And swiftly, Europe, came to table in talks with the US, and now they are negotiating some sort of a framework deal. Now, so when we talk about coming to the table from a position of strength and advantage against the US, some people would say that US still has that influence because Trump has equally come out to say that he might actually be imposing 100% tariff on the BRICS nation if they eventually follow through, most especially with a BRICS currency, an equivalent of some sorts against the dollar. So, Abraham, how would you react to this threat? Because it seems as though Trump is not really going to be backing down on this.
You see, the world is becoming a lot more restless, and nations are becoming restless. Because if you have a big brother, which I believe America is to the rest of the world, that keeps you in an awkward situation, after a while, I like the part of the scripture that says when Jacob got a blessing of Esau, one of the things that Isaac said, as we look in that, religious term, is that he said, when you become restless, he said, you will break his yoke from your neck. You see, someone cannot keep pressing your neck forever. The rest of the world will have to find a solution. I can predict that America will continue to lead the world for centuries to come. But at some point, there is going to be alternative power. Like I said earlier, there is already a parallel competition. And no matter what America does, blockchain, cryptocurrency is going to rule the world anyways. So I would say that the BRIC nations will need to get stronger. That more nations will need to join her to become a stronger force. They would also have to have Africa, if we can focus on Africa for a minute, Africa may have to expedite breaking off its borders. Imagine an Africa where there is no border, and you have over 1.3 billion people in a common economy. I don't see why. I still believe in cacophony or economic cacophony of how the world runs. I don't understand how a country like Switzerland, with less than 10 million people or thereabout, will be economically stronger than India with 1.3 billion people. I don't understand why a country like Nigeria with lithium, with gold, with crude oil, with 240 million people will be less regarded in the hierarchy or G7 or whatever name you call it, than a nation that is lesser than the size of Anambra or maybe a Sokoto, Belgium. I mean, I've driven the whole of Luxembourg sometimes for less than 2 hours, the entirety of Luxembourg for less than 2 hours. I don't understand how that nation will be richer than South Africa. So I don't know. I mean, professor who is more of an economics, a guru, can shed more light on that. But I can't seem to work it out, and the only thing I can put it on as a strategy for me is cacophony. The world runs by propaganda. That is why when we wake up on a daily basis, for those of us who trade, who buy stocks and shares and stuff like that, stock work largely by speculations. The world, IMF, the World Bank, and particularly nations, they speculate a lot. They rely on news, negativity, positivity, and everything to strengthen their currency. If the BRICS nation understand this, and maybe one last point that I'll give you, why is Kuwaiti Dira, is it Dira, the strongest currency in the world? Why is Qatar money stronger than most currency in the world? I think it's 1 to 4 in a dollar. Because some of these nations do not even allow negative speculation in their nation. You cannot speak negative of Qatar in Qatar. That's why there's no social media, there is no WhatsApp, there is no Facebook. For as long as you keep using American tools to destroy your country, like Facebook, like Instagram, check Nigeria, for example. Every single day, our younger generation wakes up, and what we do is to slander each other, to pull each other down, pull our nations down. How are you going to be strengthened? If this is what is happening among the majority of the BRIC nations, how are you going to be able to compete with America, who tells you that they are the best in the world, who tells you on a daily basis that God bless America, who tells you we're going to conquer the world? If the rest of us continue to be petulant, if the rest of us continue to be optimistic, we cannot match up with America.
All right. Now, Professor Ojah, I come to you even as we wrap up on this. Now, we understand Trump's protectionism plot and, of course, the lust for better trade deals with his partners. Now, rather than tax increase, because we are not so sure if this will backfire on America or America's economy, what do you think he should have done to probably play some diplomatic cards, bring other people to the table for some sort of subtle talks that can, bring about a win-win situation rather than having to, impose or some sort of a trade hike on his diplomatic partners?
I would approach your question from the standpoint of what my colleague just said in terms of the way Europe has responded. Europe did not respond out of fear of what the tariff would do to them specifically as a bloc of countries. I think their response is akin to what Ngozo Konjo-Iweala, the head of the WTO, said when these issues of tariff threat coming from the US president was muted. She told everybody in the panel, let's calm down. Let's not run ahead of ourselves. Cool heads must prevail. And that is what I think the European bloc is trying to do in the context of the threat, to say, okay, President Trump, let's talk. Because they do not want the global trade system to be upended by a rash decision coming from one that is supposed to be a leader of the global community, as it were, of at least of the Western global north. So let's not disrupt a system that is keeping the welfare of the global economy at a high level, because you pull everybody down. And I think that is more the response that is coming.
Okay.
And my sense is that the American people, through their representatives in the House, will get to a point where they get him and his cabinet to back off and do the right thing. Well, meanwhile, the likes of BRICS and G7 and all the rest of us, WTO, are already putting in place some measures to mitigate this threat. And therefore, the multilateralism will turn out stronger by the new calculations that will emerge to forestall such seeming disruption, radical and rascal disruption that appears to be in the offing.
All right, well, we hope that something will be done, honestly, to put an end to all these global dynamics and issues with trade in all these countries and stuff. But then thank you so much, Professor Kalu Ojah, and of course, Abraham. I'm grateful for sharing your thoughts with us. Profound contributions, I must say. It was nice having you guys talk to us on the show. And that is the end of the conversation for today. You can watch all our programs and episodes on our social media handle at News Central TV on YouTube also. And of course, I'm on DSTV 422, GoTV 23, StarTimes 274. My name is Lekon Onobanjo. Enjoy the rest of your day.